Sweat beads on Marcus Tate's brow in a stifling Alabama courtroom. The 17-year-old black teenager faces a trumped-up car theft charge. Judge Harold Vance, a white man with a cruel smirk, mocks Marcus's shaky defense, rushing the case as spectators chuckle. The guilty verdict seems certain. Then Marcus speaks, voice steady. He's a Supreme Court intern sent to expose judicial corruption. The room gasps. Vance's gavel freezes. What's this kid planning? His bombshell sparks a war that'll upend Fairmont. Where will Marcus's fight lead? Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from. If you stand for justice, hit like and subscribe, because tomorrow's episode is a game changer you won't want to miss. Marcus Tate sat in a cramped holding cell in Fairmont, Alabama, the air thick with mildew and menace. At 17, he was a lanky kid with sharp eyes and a mind honed by late nights studying law books for his Supreme Court internship. Now, he was caged, accused of stealing a car from Bradley Klein, a white neighbor who'd spat thug at him 3 days earlier, while Marcus mowed his mother's lawn. The charge was a lie, but in this small town of 5,000, truth bent to power. Fairmont's history clung like damp rot. Old plantation money, Confederate statues, and a courthouse where black folks rarely won. Marcus's arrest had been swift, almost rehearsed. 2 cops, their badges glinting under streetlights, had cuffed him outside his home, ignoring his mother's pleas. They'd found no evidence, just Klein's word, yet here he was, facing a system that chewed up kids like him. His heart pounded, not from fear but fury. He knew the game was rigged, but he wasn't here by accident. His internship wasn't just a resume line, it was a mission. 6 months ago, in a polished D.C. office, his mentor, Justice Elena Harper, had pulled him aside. A black woman with steel in her gaze, she'd said, "Marcus, we're watching judges in small towns. Some are dirty. You're our eyes." Fairmont's. Judge Harold Vance was on their radar, suspected of pocketing bribes to lock up black defendants. Marcus's job was to observe, document, maybe testify. Getting arrested wasn't part of the plan, but it had dropped him in the snake pit. He clutched that thought, a lifeline in the dark. The cell door clanged and a deputy loomed, his gut straining his uniform. "Fancy intern, boy," he sneered, tossing a stale sandwich at Marcus's feet. "Think you're slick, huh? Vance'll eat you alive." Marcus didn't flinch. He'd heard worse on Fairmont's streets, where slurs flew like sparrows. The deputy's taunts were a script: demean, degrade, destroy. Marcus ate the sandwich, choking down its dryness, and mapped his next move. He needed evidence to clear. His name, an expose Vance. A neighbor, Mrs. Clara, had a security camera that caught Klein's car parked untouched the night of the alleged theft. If Marcus could get that footage, he'd have a wedge to crack the case open. But first he had to get out of this cell. His one phone call was a gamble. The jail's payphone stank of sweat, and the line crackled as he dialed Justice Harper. She answered on the second ring, her voice a lifeline. "Marcus, you okay?" He whispered the truth. Klein's lie, Vance's smirk, the town's venom. Harper's tone hardened. "You're there to watch corruption, not be its victim. Stay sharp, I'll send a lawyer, but you need hard proof." She confirmed his intern status was real, registered with the Supreme Court's oversight program, but warned him, "Small towns bury secrets, don't trust anyone." The call cut off as the deputy banged the booth, grinning. "Time's up, boy." Marcus's mind raced. Harper's words were a spark, but he felt the walls closing in. Back in the cell, he scratched a plan on a scrap of paper towel. Step 1, contact Mrs. Clara. Step 2, get the footage to Harper's lawyer. Step 3, survive Vance's courtroom. He tucked the paper in his sock, a small act of defiance. Hours later, a public defender, a nervous white guy named Tim Reed, shuffled in. Reed's tie was crooked, his briefcase scuffed. "I'm your lawyer," he mumbled, avoiding Marcus's eyes. "Plead guilty, take a year probation. Best deal you'll get." Marcus's stomach twisted. Reed was either incompetent or bought. "I'm innocent," Marcus said, voice low. "There's footage proving it, Mrs. Clara's camera." Reed scribbled a note, promising to check, but his shifty glance screamed betrayal. Marcus didn't trust him, but he had no choice. That night, Marcus barely slept, the cell's concrete biting his back. He dreamed of his mother Yvonne, her hands calloused from 12-hour nursing shifts, her pride when he'd won the internship. "You're our future," she'd said. Now he was trapped, and she was out there, helpless. At dawn, a different deputy hauled him to a shower, tossing him a towel. "Heard you're some big-shot intern," the man said, smirking. "Don't mean squat here." Marcus showered fast, senses on edge, and slipped back to his cell. He checked his sock. The paper towel was gone. Panic flared, then iced into clarity. Someone had searched him. The footage was his only shot, and now the deputies knew he was hunting it. Midday, Reed returned, sweating despite the jail's chill. "Good news," he said, too eager. "Mrs. Clara gave me the footage. It's safe with me." Marcus's relief was a flicker, drowned by doubt. Reed's hands shook as he clutched his briefcase. "You'll bring it to court?" Marcus pressed. Reed nodded, backing away. "Sure, kid, trust me." Marcus didn't. That afternoon he was cuffed and marched to a transport van for a pre-trial hearing. The courthouse, a squat brick building with faded flags, buzzed with locals, their whispers sharp as knives. "Troublemaker," one muttered. "Should have known his place," said another. Marcus kept his head high, eyes scanning for allies. None appeared. In the courtroom, Vance presided, his jowls quivering as he skimmed papers. Marcus stood, wrists aching from cuffs, and repeated his innocence. Vance cut him off. "Save it, son. Evidence or shut up." Marcus glanced at Reed, who fumbled with his briefcase and paled. "The footage, it's missing," Reed stammered. Marcus's heart sank. Stolen. He locked eyes with the deputy from the shower, now lounging by the door, smirking. The setup was complete. Vance leaned forward, his voice syrupy with contempt. "No evidence, no case. You're looking at 3 years, boy." Marcus's internship, his mission, meant nothing here. The room spun, faces blurring into a haze of hate. He'd been so close, thinking the footage would free him, maybe even expose Vance's rot. Now it was gone, and he was alone. The deputy's smirk burned into him, a promise of worse to come. Marcus clenched his fists, nails biting palms. He wasn't done. Klein's lie, Vance's corruption, the stolen evidence, they thought they'd buried him. But Marcus had learned one thing in D.C. Power hides in secrets, and he was trained to find them. The hearing adjourned, and as guards shoved him back to the van, Marcus caught a glimpse of the crowd outside. A few held signs. "Free Marcus." A spark of hope flickered, but he squashed it. Fairmont wasn't D.C. Here, justice was a myth, and Vance was its gatekeeper. Back in his cell, Marcus paced, mind racing. The stolen footage was a blow, but not fatal. Mrs. Clara might have a backup, or Klein might slip up. Marcus's internship had taught him to think 3 steps ahead, to see patterns in chaos. Vance's rush to convict, the deputy's theft, Reed's nerves, they were threads in a bigger web. He just needed one loose end to pull. A new sound broke his thoughts. Boots on concrete. Another deputy, this one with a scar slicing his cheek, tossed a folded note through the bars. Marcus snatched it, pulse spiking, scrawled in shaky ink, "They know you're digging, watch your back." No signature. Marcus burned the note in his mind, then tore it to shreds. Someone was scared. Good. He wasn't just a kid in over his head. He was a threat. Klein's lie had started this, but Vance's shadow loomed larger. The judge's influence was a noose, tightening with every move Marcus made. He sat on the cot, exhaustion clawing at him, but resolve burned brighter. He'd find another way to get the footage, or dig up dirt on Vance himself. The Supreme Court was watching, and Marcus wasn't here to lose. As night fell, the jail's hum faded, leaving only the drip of a leaky pipe. Marcus lay still, eyes on the ceiling, plotting. He'd trusted Reed, trusted the system, and paid for it. No more mistakes. Tomorrow he'd fight smarter, harder. The cell door rattled faintly, a guard's lazy patrol. Marcus closed his eyes, not to sleep but to sharpen his edge. Vance thought he'd won. Klein thought he'd won. They were wrong. This was just the beginning. Marcus Tate stepped out of Fairmont's jail into blinding sunlight, his wrists raw from cuffs that had bitten too deep. At 17, He was a black teenager in a town that hated him, but for one fleeting moment, he felt the air of freedom. The news of his Supreme Court internship had exploded, a spark in Alabama's dry grass. Lena Brooks, a wiry activist with a megaphone and a fire in her eyes, had caught wind of his courtroom bombshell. She'd posted it online, and now should free Marcus. There was trending, a digital roar that shook Fairmont's dusty streets. Protesters, mostly black but some white, crowded the courthouse steps, their signs jagged with fury. Justice for Marcus and end Vance's reign. Lena's voice boomed, calling Judge Harold Vance a small-town tyrant as cameras rolled. Marcus, released on bail after a frantic call from his mentor, Justice Elena Harper, stood beside his mother Yvonne, whose hands trembled but held his tight. The crowd's chants were a pulse, and Marcus's chest swelled. He'd exposed Vance's rush to convict, and the world was watching. Maybe, just maybe, he'd turned the tide. His lawyer, Tim Reed, had vanished after the stolen footage debacle. But Harper's D.C. contact, a sharp attorney named Carla Ortiz, had flown in, securing his release. Ortiz, a Latina with a no-nonsense glare, whispered, "This is bigger than you, Marcus. Vance is scared." He nodded, believing her. The protesters, the hashtag Ortiz's arrival, it felt like a win. He was wrong. As Marcus and Yvonne walked home, the crowd thinning behind them, Fairmont's venom stirred. Bradley Klein, the white neighbor who'd framed Marcus for stealing his car, wasn't done. Klein, a burly mechanic with a Confederate flag on his porch, had been humiliated by the protests. Egged on by Vance's quiet nod, he doubled down. That afternoon, a local news blog, known for dog-whistle racism, posted Klein's new claim: Marcus had threatened to burn his house down. The story spread like gasoline, fanned by anonymous accounts calling Marcus a violent intern. Comments piled up, "Typical thug behavior," and "Send him to prison." Marcus saw the post on his cracked phone, his stomach lurching. He'd never spoken to Klein beyond a curt nod, but the lie took root. By dusk, Fairmont's air grew heavier. Marcus and Yvonne reached their small clapboard house, its paint peeling like old skin. Yvonne, exhausted from a 12-hour shift before her firing, tried to smile. "We'll fight this, baby," she said, but her voice cracked. Marcus wanted to believe her, to cling to the crowd's energy, but doubt gnawed. He'd trusted the system once with Reed and lost his evidence. Now the town was twisting his name into a weapon. At 9 that night, a crash shattered the quiet. A brick sailed through their living room window, glass spraying like shrapnel. Marcus dove, shielding Yvonne, his heart hammering. Scrawled on the brick in black marker was a single word: nigger. Yvonne stifled a sob, her hands shaking as she swept glass. Marcus's rage burned, a molten thing he could barely contain. He grabbed his phone, called 911, but the dispatcher's voice was cold. "We'll send someone when we can." No one came. The brick wasn't the end. The next morning, Yvonne's phone buzzed with a text from her hospital supervisor. She was fired, effective immediately, for attendance issues. It was a lie. She'd never missed a shift in 15 years. Marcus watched her slump, her pride crumbling, and felt his own resolve waver. The hospital, a Fairmont powerhouse, was tied to Vance's cronies. This was no coincidence, it was retaliation, a blade aimed at his family for his defiance. Marcus's internship, his truth, had made them targets. He paced the house, mind racing. The protests had given him bail, but at what cost? Klein's new lie, the brick. Yvonne's job loss, it was a coordinated attack, Vance's hand guiding it all. Marcus checked his phone, scrolling the hashtag. Support was growing, but so was hate. A new post caught his eye, a blurry photo of him outside the jail, captioned, "Supreme Court intern or supreme liar." His breath hitched. Someone was watching him close. Lena Brooks knocked at noon, her face grim. "Marcus, this town's turning on you," she said, handing him a flyer. It was a call for a community safety meeting organized by Klein, demanding Marcus's arrest. Lena's eyes softened. "You stirred the hornet's nest. Keep fighting, but be ready. Vance doesn't lose." Marcus nodded, but her words chilled him. He'd thought the public outcry was his shield, but it was a flare. drawing wolves. That afternoon, Ortiz called, her voice clipped. Klein's threat claim is nonsense, but it's gaining traction. We need evidence to counter it. Dig into Vance's past, anything dirty. Marcus agreed, his mission snapping back into focus. He wasn't just fighting for himself now. Yvonne's livelihood, their safety, hung in the balance. He remembered Mrs. Clara, the neighbor with the security camera. Maybe she'd kept a backup of the footage Reed lost. He slipped out, hood up, avoiding Fairmont's prying eyes. Mrs. Clara, a frail black woman with a sharp tongue, welcomed him. "Saw the news, child," she said, shaking her head. "This town's rotten." She'd saved a USB drive with the footage, hidden in a Bible. Marcus's hope surged. This could clear him, maybe even expose Klein's lie. As he left, a pickup truck idled across the street, its driver staring. Marcus's skin prickled. He tucked the USB in his sock and hurried home, the truck's engine growling behind him. Back at the house, Yvonne was packing, her face drawn. "We can't stay, Marcus," she said. "Not after the brick," he argued, voice rising. "If we run, they win. I've got the footage." She froze, eyes wide. "Then use it, but they'll come harder." She was right. That night, Marcus uploaded the footage to a secure cloud, emailing the link to Ortiz. He lay awake, the USB a weight in his pocket, believing he'd struck a blow. He hadn't. At dawn, his phone buzzed with a news alert. The community safety meeting had swelled into a rally, with Klein whipping up a crowd claiming Marcus was a danger to Fairmont. A new hashtag trended, Durung Stop Marcus. The footage, his lifeline, hadn't hit the news yet. Ortiz called, frantic. "The USB's not enough. Klein's got witnesses, paid ones, probably backing his threat story. We need more on Vance." Marcus's victory, the public's roar, was slipping away. The brick, Yvonne's firing. The rally, they were Vance's chess moves, each crueler than the last. Marcus gripped the USB, knuckles whitening. He'd thought the crowd was his army, but Fairmont's hate was louder. Klein's lies, Vance's power were choking him. Yet his internship burned in him, a vow to expose corruption. He'd find Vance's dirt no matter the cost. As he stepped outside, a siren wailed nearby and his pulse spiked. Was this the next hit? If you're raging at Fairmont's injustice, comment 1 below, hit like, and subscribe to follow Marcus's fight. Can he outsmart a town hell-bent on destroying him? Drop your thoughts. What's Vance hiding, and how will Marcus strike back? Marcus Tate's sneakers crunched on the cracked sidewalk of Fairmont, Alabama, his breath shallow under a gray dawn. At 17, he was a black teenager, marked by a town that smelled blood. The USB drive in his sock, holding Mrs. Clara's security footage, was his lifeline, proof he didn't steal Bradley Klein's car. But Fairmont's air was thick with hate, and Judge Harold Vance's shadow loomed larger than ever. Marcus had tasted freedom with the protests, felt the crowd's roar, only to be slapped down by a brick through his window, and his mother Yvonne's firing. Now he hunted for dirt on Vance, the corrupt judge who'd mocked him in court. His Supreme Court internship wasn't just a badge, it was a weapon, and he'd wield it to expose the rot. Marcus headed to the courthouse, hood up, eyes scanning for Klein's pickup or cop cars. His mentor, Justice Elena Harper, had drilled him on patterns. Corrupt judges left trails. Vance's rushed rulings, his smirk, screamed guilt. Marcus needed hard evidence, something to tie Vance to bribes or worse. The viral Free Marcus hashtag had bought him bail, but Klein's new lie that Marcus threatened him was gaining ground. A community safety meeting was now a full-blown rally, with Klein stoking fear. Marcus's lawyer, Carla Ortiz, had urged him to dig, and he wouldn't stop. The courthouse, a squat brick relic, was quiet at 6 in the morning. Marcus slipped around back, where clerks parked. He'd met Jamal Carter, a black court clerk in his 20s, last week. Jamal had seemed nervous but willing, whispering about Vance's side deals. Yesterday he'd texted Marcus to meet, promising records. Marcus trusted him, a flicker of hope in Fairmont's mire. Jamal waited by a dumpster, clutching a manila envelope. His eyes darted, sweat beading despite the cool 55-degree air. "This is big, Marcus," Jamal said, voice low. Vance's bank statements, off-book deposits, thousands monthly from shell companies. Marcus's pulse quickened. This was it, a crack in Vance's armor. He took the envelope, its weight a promise. "You sure about this?" he asked. Jamal nodded, too fast. "Just get it to your lawyer. I'm out after this." Marcus tucked the envelope inside his jacket, gratitude mixing with unease. Jamal's fear was loud, but Marcus needed allies. He thanked him and split, the envelope a burning coal against his chest. Back home, Yvonne was boxing up dishes, her face tight. "We're leaving if this gets worse," she said. Marcus shook his head, showing her the envelope. "This could end Vance." She sighed, eyes heavy with worry, but didn't argue. He called Ortiz, who was in a Montgomery hotel, prepping his defense. "Bank records?" Ortiz's voice lit up. "Bring them now. If they're real, we've got Vance by the throat." Marcus grabbed his bike, the envelope secure, and pedaled hard, Fairmont streets blurring past. The rally was tonight, and Klein's lies were spreading like kudzu. Marcus imagined Vance squirming, his bribes exposed, his gavel silenced. He was halfway to Montgomery, 30 miles out, when a sheriff's cruiser pulled alongside. His stomach dropped. The deputy, the one with the scarred cheek from the jail, leaned out. "Where you rushing, boy?" Marcus kept pedaling, heart hammering. "Got somewhere to be," he said, voice steady. The deputy grinned, all teeth. "Better slow down, roads ain't safe." The cruiser peeled off, but Marcus's skin crawled. They knew he was moving. At Ortiz's hotel, a budget spot off the highway, Marcus handed over the envelope. Ortiz flipped through, her eyes narrowing. "These deposits, they're tied to a construction firm. Vance's brother owns it. This is gold, Marcus." She locked. The records in a safe, promising to file a motion exposing Vance's corruption. Marcus exhaled, a weight lifting. He'd done it, found the dirt. He biked home, the sunset bleeding red, believing he'd struck a blow. He was wrong. That night, the rally erupted. Marcus watched it live-streamed. Klein at a podium, his voice a snarl. "This Tate kid's a menace, threatened my family. Now he's got outsiders stirring trouble." The crowd, mostly white, roared. Marcus's name was Poison. The Stop Marcus. Hashtag spiking. He checked his phone, expecting Ortiz's update. Nothing. Unease gnawed. At 10, Yvonne screamed from the kitchen. Marcus ran, finding her staring at a letter slipped under the door, scrawled in red ink, "Leave or burn." His blood iced. The brick was bad. This was a death threat. He called Ortiz, but her phone went to voicemail. Panic clawed him. Something was off. At midnight, a text from an unknown number. "Courthouse now." Marcus hesitated, then grabbed a pocket knife, slipping out. The courthouse lot was dark, sodium lights flickering. Jamal stood there, shaking. "Marcus, I messed up," he whispered. "Vance got to me. Those records, they're fake. I set you up." Marcus's world tilted. Betrayal burned, sharper than the brick's slur. "Why?" he demanded. Jamal's voice broke. "They threatened my sister, man, said she'd lose her kids. I'm sorry." Before Marcus could speak, headlights flared. The scarred deputy's cruiser rolled up, Vance in the passenger seat, his jowls quivering with a grin. "Smart kid, dumb move," Vance said. "Fake records? That's tampering. You're done." Marcus's knife felt useless, his mind blank. Jamal bolted, leaving Marcus alone. The deputy stepped out, cracking his knuckles. "Should have stayed quiet, intern." Marcus ran, legs pumping, the envelope's promise now a trap. He ducked into an alley, heart slamming, and hid behind a dumpster, the stench of rot choking him. The cruiser's siren wailed, fading as it passed. Marcus's mind raced. Jamal's betrayal wasn't just personal, it was Vance's checkmate. The fake records would discredit him, paint him as a liar, not a whistleblower. Ortiz would file them unaware, and Vance would pounce, burying Marcus's case. He checked his phone, 1 bar. A voicemail from Ortiz, time-stamped an hour ago. "Marcus, the records look off. Call me." Too late. He was alone, the rally's hate echoing in his head, the death threat's red ink seared in his mind. Fairmont wasn't just fighting him, it was erasing him. Marcus crouched, knife trembling. in his hand. The USB footage was still out there, safe in the cloud, but Klein's new witnesses and Vance's fake records were strangling his chance. Yvonne's fear, the rally's venom, Jamal's stab, they were all Vance's doing, each blow harder than the last. Marcus had thought the protests were his sword, the records his shield. Now he saw the truth. Fairmont played dirty, and Vance was its king. His internship, his mission to expose corruption, was a flicker in a storm. But flickers could ignite. He'd find another way, another source, even if it meant sneaking into Vance's office himself. The alley's shadows hid him, but not for long. Footsteps echoed nearby and his breath caught. Had Vance's men tracked him? If you're boiling at Jamal's betrayal and Vance's trap, drop a 1 in the comments, smash that like button, and subscribe to see Marcus fight back. What's Marcus's next move, and can he outrun a town that wants him gone? Marcus Tate crouched in the alley's shadows, the stench of rotting garbage clogging his throat. Fairmont, Alabama was a trap, and at 17, he was its prey. The footsteps he'd heard faded, but his heart still slammed against his ribs. Jamal's betrayal, the fake bank records, Judge Harold Vance's smug grin in the cruiser, it was all a setup to bury him. Marcus, a black teenager with a Supreme Court internship, had come to expose corruption, not to be crushed by it. But Fairmont played dirty. The USB drive in his sock, holding Mrs. Clara's footage proving he didn't steal Bradley Klein's car, was his only card left. He'd sent it to his lawyer, Carla Ortiz, but now even she doubted him, her voicemail warning the records were off. Marcus slipped out of the alley, hood up, the night air sharp at 60 degrees. He needed to reach Yvonne, his mother, before Vance's next blow landed. The death threat, a red-inked note promising to burn their home, still seared his mind. He jogged, avoiding streetlights. Fairmont's silence a predator waiting to pounce. At home, Yvonne was awake, her eyes red from crying. "Marcus, you can't keep running," she said, voice fraying. He showed her the knife, his desperation. "I'm not running, Ma. I'm fighting." She hugged him, her nurse's hand steady despite her fear. He didn't tell her about Jamal. It'd break her. Morning brought a new storm. Marcus woke to his phone buzzing, notifications flooding in. A local TV station, Fairmont News 6, had aired a segment. Supreme Court Intern or Supreme Con? The anchor, a white woman with a tight smile, questioned Marcus's internship, citing anonymous sources. They flashed a grainy photo of him in cuffs, then cut to Klein, his voice shaking with fake fear. "This kid's a liar. Threatened my kids, my home. Now he's faking some DC job." The segment ended with a bombshell, a leaked document. Supposedly Marcus's internship application, riddled with errors and forged signatures. Marcus's stomach churned. The internship was real, vetted by Justice Elena Harper herself, but Fairmont didn't care. The smear was Vance's work, a blade to gut his credibility. Social media erupted. Hang's fake intern trended, drowning out Nanch and Free Marcus. Comments stung. Lying thug and back to jail. Even Lena Brooks, the activist who'd rallied for him, texted cautiously, "Marcus, is this true?" He replied, "It's real, they're lying." But doubt crept in, even among allies. Marcus called Ortiz, his voice tight. "They're saying I faked it, Carla. You've got the USB, use it." Ortiz sighed, her tone strained. "The footage helps, but this smear's loud. The court's delaying your hearing, citing public safety. We need Harper to verify your status fast." Marcus's hope flickered. Harper was his rock, but DC felt a world away. He spent the day scouring online forums, hunting for Vance's dirt. A whistleblower account, Fairmont Truth, hinted at the judge's ties to a private prison firm, but it was vague, no proof. Marcus saved the link, his internship training kicking in. Follow the money. By afternoon, the smear campaign sharpened. A flyer appeared on Fairmont's lampposts, showing Marcus's mugshot with dangerous fraud in bold. Kids he'd known. Since grade school unfollowed him online. His cousin Ty called, voice low, "Man, they're saying you're a scam. Aunt Yvonne's getting looks at the store." Marcus's rage boiled, but he swallowed it. He biked to the library, a crumbling building with slow Wi-Fi, to dig deeper. There he found a 2018 article. Vance's brother, a construction mogul, had donated to the judge's campaign. It wasn't much, but it was a thread. He emailed it to Ortiz, praying it'd help. As he left, a group of white teens, Klein's nephew among them, blocked his path. "Fake intern," one spat, shoving him. Marcus clenched his fists but walked away, their laughter burning his ears. The town was closing ranks. That night, Yvonne's phone rang. It was her old boss, offering her job back but with a catch. She'd work nights, no benefits. "They're punishing us," she whispered. Marcus nodded, guilt clawing him. His fight was costing her everything. He checked the news again. A news story claimed he'd hacked the Supreme Court site to fake his internship. The lie was absurd. But it stuck. Protesters outside the courthouse dwindled, Lena's megaphone quieter. Marcus felt the walls tightening. "At 11, Ortiz called, her voice grim. "Harper's verifying your status, but Vance's team filed a motion to discredit you. They're saying you planted the USB footage, too." Marcus's breath caught. His lifeline, Mrs. Clara's video, was being twisted against him. "How?" he demanded. Ortiz paused. "Klein's got a new witness, a neighbor, swearing you snuck into Clara's yard that night." Marcus's mind flashed to the pickup truck idling outside Clara's house. Vance was rewriting reality. He lay awake, the smear campaign's weight, crushing him. The internship, his pride, was now a joke. Fairmont's hate was a tide pulling him under. But he wasn't done. Ortiz had the footage, and Harper's word could still save him. He'd go to Mrs. Clara again, ask about that witness. Maybe she'd seen something. At dawn, he slipped out, the town stirring with a new rally cry, "Lock up the liar." A local blog posted his school photo, calling him a dangerous activist. Marcus's name was poison, his mission teetering. He reached Clara's, knocking. Softly. She opened the door, her face grim. "They came for me, Marcus," she said. "Said I'd lose my house if I backed you." His heart sank. The witness was coerced, another of Vance's moves sequel to the original, but with a different setting and characters. The climax hit at noon. A national news outlet picking up Fairmont's story ran a segment, "Teen's Internship Under Scrutiny." They interviewed a DC insider who claimed Marcus's application was flagged for fraud. The anchor questioned whether the Supreme Court had been duped. Marcus watched numb as his dream was shredded. Klein appeared tearful, saying Marcus had spray-painted slurs on his garage. The lie was bold, but it landed. Fake intern spiked again, and Ortiz texted, "We're losing ground. Need something big." Marcus gripped his phone, fury rising. Vance and Klein weren't just framing him, they were erasing him. He'd thought the footage and records were his edge, but the smear was louder. Clara's fear, Yvonne's job loss, the rally's hate, it was all Vance, each blow sharper. Marcus stood, resolve hardening. He'd break into the courthouse if he had to, find real records, anything to nail Vance. As he planned, a cop car rolled by, slow, the scarred deputy grinning. Time was running out. If you're furious at Vance's lies tearing Marcus down, comment 1 below, hit like, and subscribe to see his next move. Can Marcus find the proof to flip this war, or will Fairmont's hate win? Drop your thoughts. What's Klein's next lie, and how will Marcus fight back? Marcus Tate's breath fogged in the chilly Fairmont night, the Alabama air dipping to 50 degrees as he crouched behind a rusted dumpster. At 17, he was a black teenager fighting a war he hadn't chosen, his Supreme Court internship, now a target for Judge Harold Vance's smear campaign. The fake intern hashtag burned online, twisting his mission to expose corruption into a lie. Bradley Klein's false claims, the forged documents, Mrs. Clara's coerced silence, and his mother Yvonne's job loss were all Vance's doing, each blow cutting deeper. Marcus's only hope was the USB footage proving he didn't steal Klein's car, but even that was tainted by a new witness claiming he'd faked it. His lawyer, Carla Ortiz, was losing ground, and Justice Elena Harper's verification of his internship was stalled in DC bureaucracy. Marcus needed hard proof of Vance's corruption, something undeniable, and he was done waiting. The courthouse, a brick fortress of Fairmont's injustice, held answers. He'd break in, find Vance's real financial records, and blow the lid off. It was reckless, but desperation was his fuel. Marcus adjusted his backpack, stuffed with a flashlight, gloves, and a screwdriver from Yvonne's toolbox. His pocket knife, a small defiance, pressed against his thigh. He'd slipped out at midnight, Yvonne asleep, unaware of his plan. The death threat, a red-inked promise to burn their home, still haunted him, but he couldn't stop. Fairmont wanted him broken. He'd break it first. The courthouse loomed, its windows dark, the Confederate statue out front a grim sentinel. Marcus circled to the back where a service door rusted in neglect. He'd watched clerks use it, noticed. Its lock was loose. His internship had taught him to observe, to find cracks in systems. He jimmied the screwdriver, sweat beading despite the cold, and the door creaked open. Inside, the air was stale, thick with dust and secrets. His flashlight beam danced over filing cabinets and flickering exit signs. Vance's office was upstairs, third floor, a locked kingdom of corruption. Marcus moved fast, heart pounding, the silence deafening. He climbed the stairs, avoiding a security camera he'd spotted days ago. Its red light was off, a stroke of luck, or a trap. On the third floor, Vance's door was oak, heavy, with a brass nameplate gleaming like a taunt. The lock was new, a deadbolt, but Marcus had watched YouTube tutorials in the library, his hands steady from years of fixing Yvonne's old car. He worked the screwdriver, then the knife, metal scraping metal. The lock clicked after 10, agonizing. Minutes, and he slipped inside, closing the door softly. Vance's office smelled of cigar smoke and arrogance. A mahogany desk dominated, papers stacked neatly, a computer humming faintly. Marcus gloved up, his flashlight scanning. He needed bank records, contracts, anything tying Vance to bribes or the private prison firm hinted at online. He rifled. Drawers, finding budgets and court schedules, nothing incriminating. The computer was password protected, and he cursed silently. Time was bleeding away. In a locked filing cabinet, he found a folder labeled Consulting Fees. His pulse spiked. Inside were invoices, thousands of dollars monthly from a company called Delta Holdings, signed by Vance's brother, Carl. Marcus's breath caught. This was it, the real deal, not Jamal's fake bait. He stuffed the folder in his backpack, hands shaking with triumph. He'd done it, outsmarted Vance. He'd get this to Ortiz, expose the judge, clear his name. He was wrong. As he turned, a floorboard creaked outside. Marcus froze, flashlight off, knife out. The door burst open and the scarred deputy from the jail loomed, his baton gleaming. Behind him stood Klein's nephew, a lanky 19-year-old with a sneer, and another man, a stranger in a black jacket, eyes cold. "Told you he'd bite," the deputy said, grinning. Marcus's stomach plummeted. The camera's dead light. The loose door, it was a setup. Vance's trap sprung. "Breaking and entering," the deputy drawled. "Bad move, intern." Marcus bolted for the window, but the nephew tackled him, slamming him to the floor. Pain exploded in his ribs as the deputy's baton cracked down once, twice. Marcus gasped, vision blurring, the knife skittering away. The stranger grabbed his backpack, ripping out the folder. "This what you wanted?" he taunted, tearing pages. Marcus lunged, desperation raw, but the nephew's fist smashed his jaw, blood flooding his mouth. They dragged him to his feet, the deputy's grip iron. "Vance says hi," he whispered, then slammed Marcus's head against the desk. The world spun, his internship, his mission fading to black. He woke in an alley, dawn breaking, his body a map of bruises. His backpack was gone, the folder with it. His knife was missing, his phone cracked but alive. A text from Ortiz. "Hearings. Tomorrow. Where are you?" Marcus spat blood, pain lancing his side. The USB was still safe, but the records, his golden ticket, were ash. Vance hadn't just outplayed him. He'd crushed him. The attack wasn't random, it was a message. Stop digging or die. Marcus staggered home, Yvonne's scream echoing as she saw his face. "What did they do?" she sobbed, cleaning his cuts. He didn't answer, couldn't. The smear campaign had stripped his name, the rally had turned Fairmont against him, and now this, a beating to break his will. But Marcus's eyes burned, his internship's vow a fire in his gut. Vance thought. He'd won, thought a few bruises would silence him. He was wrong. Marcus remembered the folder's details, Delta Holdings, the amounts. He'd tell Ortiz, find another way to trace it. The hearing loomed, and Klein's witness was still out. There a lie he could crack. He stood wincing and hugged Yvonne. "I'm not done, Ma," he said. She nodded, tears falling, but her grip was fierce. Outside, a cop car idled, the scarred deputy's grin visible. Marcus stared back, defiance his only weapon. The town was a noose, tightening with every move, but he'd slip it. He had to. Vance's trap had bloodied him, but it hadn't killed him. Not yet. Marcus Tate's ribs ached with every breath, the bruises from the courthouse beating a pulsing reminder of Fairmont's hate. At 17, he was a black teenager in Alabama, his Supreme Court internship mocked as a fraud by a town hell-bent on breaking him. Judge Harold Vance's smear campaign, fueled by Bradley Klein's lies, had turned Shao fake Intern into a digital guillotine. The USB footage proving Marcus didn't steal Klein's car was safe, but a coerced witness, a neighbor, claiming Marcus faked it, threatened to bury him. His mother Yvonne's tear-streaked face, the red-inked death threat and the loss of her job were Vance's blows, each crueler than the last. Marcus, bloodied but unbowed, refused to quit. His lawyer, Carla Ortiz, had warned the hearing was tomorrow, and Justice Elena Harper's verification of his internship was still tangled in D.C. red tape. Marcus needed to flip the script, expose the witness as a liar, and keep his mission alive. He sat in their cramped living room, the broken window boarded up, and replayed Mrs. Clara's words. "They said I'd lose my house." The witness, a white retiree named Ed Grayson, lived 2 doors down. Marcus had seen Grayson's nervous glances, his truck parked at Klein's late at night. He was Vance's puppet, but puppets had strings to cut. Marcus grabbed his cracked phone, ignoring the pain in his jaw, and texted Lena Brooks, the activist who'd rallied for him. "Need help. Grayson's lying. Can you dig?" Lena replied fast. "On it. Meet me at the diner, noon." Marcus slipped on a hoodie, wincing as he moved, and told Yvonne he'd be back. Her eyes, heavy with fear, followed him out. "Be careful, baby," she whispered. He nodded, the weight of her trust heavier than his bruises. The diner, a greasy spoon. On Fairmont's edge smelled of burnt coffee and bacon. Lena sat in a corner booth, her laptop open, her braids tucked under a cap. "Grayson's got debts," she said, sliding Marcus a printout. "Bank records show he's behind on his mortgage. Klein paid him $5,000 last week." Marcus's pulse quickened. This was leverage. If Grayson admitted coercion, Klein's frame-up would crack and Vance's grip might loosen. Lena leaned in. "I've got a contact at the bank. She'll testify, but we need Grayson to flip first." Marcus nodded, hope sparking. He'd confront Grayson, record it, and hand it to Ortiz. The hearing was his chance to strike back. He biked to Grayson's house, a sagging ranch with peeling paint, the midday sun harsh at 80 degrees. His ribs screamed, but he pushed through, knocking hard. Grayson answered, a wiry man in his 60s, his eyes darting. "What do you want, kid?" he snapped. Marcus kept his voice calm, phone recording in his pocket. "I know Klein paid you to lie. Tell the truth, or the bank spills your debts." Grayson's face paled, his hands shaking. "You don't get it," he hissed. "They'll ruin me." Marcus pressed. "Who? Vance?" Grayson froze, then nodded, voice barely audible. "He called it a favor. Said I'd lose everything if—" "I didn't." Marcus's heart raced. He had it, a confession, shaky but real. "Testify tomorrow," he said. Grayson slammed the door, but Marcus felt the ground shift. He sent the recording to Ortiz, biking home with a flicker of triumph. He'd exposed the witness, cracked Vance's lie. He was wrong. That afternoon, Ortiz called, her voice tight. "Good work on Grayson, but Vance's team just filed a new charge, witness intimidation. They're using your visit to say you threatened him." Marcus's stomach dropped. "I didn't," he protested. Ortiz sighed. "Grayson's swearing you pulled a knife. Klein's backing him, says you're violent." Marcus's vision blurred, the beating's pain flaring. His knife, lost in the courthouse, was now a prop in their lie. The recording, his ace, was useless if Grayson flipped back. At 6, the news hit. Fairmont News 6 ran a story, teen intern accused of threats. They showed Grayson, teary, claiming Marcus had stormed his porch, knife flashing. Klein appeared, voice grave. "This kid's a danger, lock him up." The Can't Stop Marcus hashtag surged, comments vicious. "Knife-wielding thug and deport him." Marcus's triumph curdled. Vance hadn't just countered, he'd turned Marcus's move into a noose. Yvonne watched the news, her hands trembling. "They're killing you, Marcus," she whispered. He hugged her, guilt choking him. His fight was tearing her apart. Lena texted, "Grayson's scared, won't testify." Marcus's hope died. The hearing was hours away, and Vance was rewriting the board. He paced, mind racing. The USB footage was still his card, but the intimidation charge was a landmine. Ortiz needed Grayson to crack, or Harper's word, or both. Marcus checked his phone, finding a new email from Fairmont Truth, the whistleblower account. It was a single line, "Vance's clerk has more, find her." Marcus's breath caught. A clerk, maybe not Jamal, knew Vance's dirt. He'd track her tomorrow, after the hearing. But first, he had to survive court. At 9, a knock rattled the door. Marcus peered out, heart pounding. It was Ty, his cousin, holding a duffel. "Yvonne called me. You need to hide, man. Cops are circling." Marcus shook his head. "I'm facing Vance tomorrow." Ty's eyes widened. "You're crazy. They'll lock you up." Marcus didn't answer. Running meant losing, and his internship, his mission, was all he had. He slept fitfully, dreaming of Grayson's shaky voice, Vance's gavel, the deputy's baton. Dawn broke and he dressed for court, ribs throbbing, resolve iron. Yvonne prayed over him, her voice a lifeline. "You're stronger than them," she said. He nodded, but the intimidation charge loomed, a wall he couldn't climb. As he stepped outside, a crowd gathered, not protesters, but Klein's allies, their signs cruel. "No thugs in Fairmont." A rock sailed past, grazing his cheek. Marcus kept walking, blood trickling, the courthouse a gauntlet ahead. Vance's counterattack wasn't just legal, it was personal, a blade to his soul. The hearing would be a slaughter, but Marcus had Grayson's confession, even if shaky. He'd fight, expose the lie, or die trying. If you're seething at Vance twisting Marcus's truth into a crime, comment 1 below, hit like and subscribe to see his courtroom battle. Will Grayson's confession hold, or is Vance's next trap already set? Drop your thoughts. Can Marcus turn the tables, or will Fairmont's lies win? Marcus Tate stood in the Fairmont courthouse, his bruised ribs throbbing under a borrowed suit that hung loose on his 17-year-old frame. The Alabama air was thick with tension, the courtroom packed with hostile faces. Judge Harold Vance, his jowls quivering, presided like a king, his gavel a scepter of corruption. Marcus, a black teenager accused of stealing Bradley Klein's car, was fighting for his life. His Supreme Court internship, meant to expose Vance's bribes, was now a punchline, twisted by the fake intern smear. The USB footage proving his innocence was with Carla Ortiz, his lawyer. But Klein's coerced witness, Ed Grayson, and a new witness intimidation charge threatened to bury him. His mother, Yvonne's firing, the death threat, the courthouse beating, all were Vance's blows, each sharper than the last. Marcus gripped Grayson's recorded confession, a shaky lifeline, and faced the storm. Ortiz, her suit crisp despite sleepless nights, leaned in. "We've got the footage and Grayson's tape. Harper's verification is coming, but Vance will fight dirty." Marcus nodded, his jaw tight, the rocks graze on his cheek still stinging from the crowd outside. The hearing began, Vance's voice dripping contempt. "Mr. Tate, you're charged with theft, and now intimidation. Plead or we move to trial." Marcus stood, voice steady. "Not guilty, Your Honor, I have evidence." The room murmured, Klein in the front row glaring, his mechanic's hands clenched. Ortiz played the USB footage on a courtroom screen, Mrs. Clara's camera showing Klein's car untouched the night of the alleged theft. Gasps rippled. Vance's eyes narrowed. Marcus's heart lifted. This was his shot. Ortiz followed with Grayson's recording, his voice trembling. "Vance told me to lie. Klein paid me." The crowd erupted, some shouting slurs, others demanding justice. Marcus locked eyes with Grayson, seated pale and sweating. For a moment, he believed he'd won, that Vance's lies would crumble. He was wrong. Vance banged his gavel, silencing the chaos. "This recording is inadmissible," he declared. "No chain of custody, and Mr. Grayson denies its authenticity." Grayson, avoiding Marcus's gaze, nodded weakly. Ortiz protested. "Your Honor, the footage corroborates." Vance smirked. "Footage can be edited, and this intimidation charge suggests Mr. Tate's capable of worse." Marcus's stomach twisted. Vance was rewriting reality, his power absolute. Klein took the stand, his voice oily with fake fear. "Marcus threatened my family, waved a knife at Ed. He's no intern, just a thug." Marcus's blood boiled. The lost knife from the beating now a prop in their lie. Ortiz cross-examined, pressing Klein on the payment to Grayson. Klein stumbled, admitting a loan, but Vance cut her off. "Irrelevant," he snapped, and dismissed Klein. Marcus whispered to Ortiz, "He's rigging it." She nodded, her face grim. "We need Harper's letter, now." The prosecution called a surprise witness, the scarred deputy, Roy Haskins. Marcus's pulse spiked. Haskins, who'd beaten him in Vance's office, swaggered up, swearing Marcus had lunged at Grayson with a blade, same one he pulled on me in jail. The lie was bold, the knife long gone, but the jury, mostly white, leaned forward, eating it up. Marcus's hope frayed. The footage, Grayson's confession, was slipping away, drowned by Vance's script. Ortiz fought back, presenting bank. Records Lena Brooks had dug up, showing Klein's payment to Grayson. Vance waved them off, claiming privacy violations. Marcus's mind raced. He'd trained for this, spotting corruption's patterns, but Vance was a wall, unyielding. At noon, Ortiz got a text. Harper's verification had arrived, emailed to the court. She stood, voice firm. "Your Honor, the Supreme Court confirms Marcus Tate's internship, effective June last year, tasked with observing judicial misconduct." The room buzzed, a few jurors shifting. Marcus exhaled, believing Harper's weight would tip the scales. Vance's face darkened, but he smiled, a predator's grin. "Noted, counsel, but internship or not, evidence tampering and intimidation are serious. We'll recess for deliberation." Marcus's relief died. Vance was stalling, twisting Harper's truth into a footnote. The recess stretched, hours crawling in a holding room where Marcus paced, Ortiz's face drawn. "He's burying us," she said. "The jury's scared, and Vance knows it." Marcus clenched his fists, nails biting. Palms. He'd exposed Grayson, shown the footage, but Vance's power was a tide pulling him under. At 3 they returned, and Vance's verdict hit like a sledgehammer. "Given new allegations," he said, "I'm revoking Mr. Tate's bail. He's a flight risk and a danger." Marcus's world tilted. Ortiz gasped. "On what grounds?" Vance pointed to Haskins, now holding a knife, Marcus's knife, its blade glinting. "Found in the defendant's possession post-intimidation," Vance lied. Marcus shouted, "That's not mine." But deputies grabbed him, cuffs snapping tight. The courtroom cheered, Klein's smirk burning into him. It was a setup, the beating's loss weaponized. Marcus's fight, his evidence, had been flipped into a trap. As deputies dragged him out, Ortiz yelled, "We'll appeal," but the crowd's jeers drowned her. Marcus saw Yvonne in the back sobbing, her hands clutching a rosary. His mission, his internship, was choking in Vance's grip. The knife, planted or stolen, was Vance's checkmate, tying Marcus to a crime he didn't commit. In the holding cell, his suit torn, Marcus slumped, pain radiating from his ribs. The footage was real, Grayson's confession true, but Vance had turned them to ash. The revocation of bail wasn't just a setback. It was a death knell, locking him away before Ortiz could regroup. Klein's lies, Haskins's perjury, Vance's gavel, they were a machine grinding him down. Yet Marcus's eyes burned, his training a spark. He'd memorized the Delta Holdings invoices from Vance's office, their numbers etched in his mind. Ortiz could trace them, maybe find the clerk Fairmont Truth mentioned. The hearing had imploded, but Marcus wasn't done. Vance thought cuffs would silence him, thought a planted knife would end it. He was wrong. Marcus sat straighter, ignoring. The cell's mildew stink. He'd whisper the invoice details to Ortiz, get Lena to hunt the clerk. The crowd outside, smaller but still there, held signs. Free Marcus. A flicker of hope lived. As a guard's boots echoed, Marcus braced, ready for the next hit. Vance's machine was relentless, but so was he. Marcus Tate's wrists burned under the cuffs, the Fairmont jail cell's mildew stench choking his lungs. At 17, he was a black teenager whose Supreme Court internship had become a curse in Alabama's rotten heart. Judge Harold Vance's gavel had revoked his bail, framing him with a planted knife and a witness intimidation charge. Bradley Klein's lies, the fake intern smear, and the coerced testimony of Ed Grayson had crushed Marcus's courtroom fight. The USB footage proving his innocence was dismissed, his mother Yvonne's life was unraveling, and his mentor, Justice Elena Harper's verification, was buried in D.C. delays. Marcus's ribs, bruised from the courthouse beating, pulsed with pain, but his mind was a blade, sharpened by desperation. The Fairmont Truth email, "Vance's clerk has more," was a lifeline. He had to find her, expose Vance's Delta Holdings bribes, and salvage his mission. Slumped on the cell's cot, Marcus whispered the invoice details he'd memorized to himself. Delta Holdings, 10,000 monthly, Carl Vance's signature. Carla Ortiz, his lawyer, could trace them, but Marcus was locked away, his hearing a slaughter. A guard's boots clanged, and Marcus tensed, expecting another taunt. Instead, a folded note slid under the door, scrawled in blue ink. "Clerk's name is Sarah Wells, Library Midnight." No signature. Marcus's pulse raced. Was this Fairmont Truth or another of Vance's traps? He tore the note, flushing the scraps, and waited, the cell's drip counting. Seconds. At 10, Ortiz visited, her face etched with exhaustion. "The knife's a plant, but the jury's bought it," she said. Marcus leaned close, voice low. "Sarah Wells, courthouse clerk. She knows Vance's dirt. Delta Holdings, 10,000 a month. Find her." Ortiz's eyes widened. "If she's real, we've got a shot. I'll dig." She left, promising to appeal his bail, but Marcus felt the clock ticking. He'd trusted Jamal, and it cost him. Sarah Wells could be another knife. That night, a new guard, a young black woman with wary eyes, escorted him to a shower. "Heard you're fighting Vance," she whispered. "Keep it quiet." Marcus nodded, hope flickering. Was she Fairmont Truth? He didn't ask, couldn't risk it. Back in his cell, he planned. If Ortiz found Sarah, they'd have Vance's bribes, maybe enough to force a mistrial. The guard's words lingered, a crack in Fairmont's wall. At dawn, Marcus was cuffed and marched to a transport van for a pre-trial meeting. The courthouse buzzed, Klein's allies outside waving "no thugs" signs. Marcus kept his head high, ignoring their slurs. Ortiz met him in a cramped room, her laptop open. "Sarah Wells exists," she said. "Clerk, works nights, been with Vance 10 years. I tracked her to the library, but she's skittish. Lena's meeting her tonight." Marcus's heart leapt. Lena Brooks, the activist, was his last ally. If Sarah had records, they could nail Vance. He believed they were close, that Sarah's secret would turn the tide. He was wrong. At noon, Ortiz's phone buzzed, her face paling as she read. "Marcus, it's Yvonne," she said, voice breaking. "Her house, it's gone." Marcus's world stopped. "What?" Ortiz showed him a news alert. "Fairmont home destroyed in fire." Yvonne's clapboard house, their refuge, was ash, the blaze accidental per the fire chief, a Vance crony. Marcus's knees buckled, his ribs screaming as he gasped. The death threat, leave or burn, wasn't a bluff. Vance had struck, not at him, but at Yvonne, his heart. Ortiz gripped his shoulder. "She's safe, with your cousin Ty. But everything's gone." Marcus's vision blurred, rage and grief colliding. Yvonne's photos, her nurse's scrubs, his law books, all dust. He'd pushed, dug for Sarah, and Vance had answered with fire. The guard shoved him back to the van, his mind a storm. Yvonne's loss wasn't just personal. It was Vance's warning. Keep fighting. Lose more. Back in his cell, Marcus punched the wall, knuckles splitting. The USB, Grayson's confession, Harper's letter. None of it mattered if Vance could burn their lives. Ortiz called, her voice strained. Lena met Sarah. She's got a ledger, Vance's real bribes, but she's terrified. Wants immunity. Marcus's hope flickered, faint but alive. "Get it," he said. "I'll take the stand, tell everything." Ortiz hesitated. "You're a kid, Marcus. They'll tear you apart." He didn't care. His mission, his internship, was all he had left. That night a news story hit. Fairmont News 6 claimed Yvonne had set the fire for insurance, painting her as a criminal. The lie was vile, Yvonne's policy barely covering their mortgage. Stop Marcus morphed into Doc Stop Tate Family, comments calling them arsonists and grifters. Marcus's grief hardened into resolve. Vance wasn't just framing him. He was erasing his family. He scratched Sarah's name into his mind, a beacon in the dark. The ledger could end this, expose Vance's prison firm ties, force a federal probe. But the fire changed everything. Yvonne was homeless, Ty's place a temporary fix. Marcus's fight was costing too much. At 11, the guard from last night passed, slipping him a candy bar, a small kindness. "Stay strong," she whispered. Marcus nodded, her face a blur. Was she helping or watching? He couldn't trust, not after Jamal. He lay on the cot, the cells cold, biting his bruises. The hearing was days away, his bail appeal a long shot. Sarah's ledger was his last card, but Vance's fire was a checkmate, a blow to his soul. He pictured Yvonne's smile, her pride when he'd won the internship. "You're our future," she'd said. Now, their future was ash. Marcus sat up, jaw tight. He'd get the ledger or die trying. Vance thought fire would break him, thought cuffs would silence him. He was wrong. Marcus whispered the Delta Holdings numbers, a mantra against despair. Ortiz would find Sarah, Lena would push, and he'd face Vance, no matter the cost. As the cell's drip echoed, a siren wailed outside. Close. Was Vance's next hit coming? If you're gutted by Vance burning Yvonne's home to crush Marcus, comment 1 below, hit like, and subscribe to see his fight roar back. Can Sarah's ledger topple Vance, or will Fairmont's fire consume Marcus's hope? Drop your thoughts. What's Vance's next move, and how will Marcus rise? Marcus Tate's cell felt like a coffin, the Fairmont jail's damp concrete seeping into his bones. At 17, he was a black teenager whose Supreme Court internship had become a target for Judge Harold Vance's wrath. The planted knife, the fake intern smear, and the fire that razed his mother Yvonne's home were Vance's blows, each slicing deeper. Bradley Klein's lies, Ed Grayson's coerced testimony, and a rigged hearing had locked Marcus away, his bail revoked. The USB footage proving his innocence was dismissed, and Justice Elena Harper's verification was stalled. Sarah Wells, the clerk with Vance's bribe ledger, was his last hope, her name a whisper from Fairmont truth. Marcus's ribs ached from the courthouse beating, but his mind burned, fueled by Yvonne's loss and the fight to expose Vance's Delta Holdings bribes. Carla Ortiz, his lawyer, was hunting Sarah, and Lena Brooks was pushing for her to talk. Marcus sat on the cot, whispering the invoice numbers, 10,000 monthly, Carl Vance's signature, a mantra against despair. A guard's boots echoed, and Marcus tensed, expecting trouble. Instead, a new note slid under the door. "Sarah's ready. Lena's place 2 tonight." His pulse surged. Was this real, or another trap like Jamal's? He flushed the note, heart pounding. Ortiz visited at 9, her eyes bloodshot. "Sarah's meeting Lena," she said. "If we get the ledger, we can file for a federal probe. But Vance is watching. Be ready to testify." Marcus nodded, his mission clear. He'd take the stand, spill everything, even if it painted a target. The fire had cost Yvonne her home, but Marcus's fight was her future. He believed Sarah's ledger would crack Vance's empire. He was wrong. At noon, Lena texted Ortiz, who relayed it to Marcus through a guard. Sarah wanted a deal, immunity for her and her kid. She'd worked for Vance 10 years, knew his prison, firm ties, and had the ledger hidden in a safe deposit box. Marcus's hope soared. If Ortiz secured immunity, they'd have Vance by the throat. He paced the cell, ignoring the pain in his jaw, picturing Vance's smirk fading. The guard from Last night, the black woman with wary eyes passed by, nodding slightly. Marcus caught it, a silent ally. Was she Fairmont Truth? He couldn't ask, not yet. By evening, Ortiz called, voice tense. Lena's got Sarah at her apartment. I'm drafting the immunity deal, but the feds are slow. We need that ledger before. Vance sniffs it out. Marcus's stomach knotted. Vance's reach was long, his fire a warning. He whispered to Ortiz, "Tell Lena to move fast. They burned our house. They'll hit harder." Ortiz agreed, promising to push. Marcus lay back. The cell's drip a countdown. Sarah's ledger was his gambit, a risk to end this war. At 10, a commotion broke the jail's hum. Shouts, boots, a radio crackling. Marcus sat up, heart racing. The guard rushed past, her face tight. "Stay put," she snapped, but her eyes flicked to him, urgent. Minutes later, Ortiz called, her voice shaking. "Marcus, it's Ty." His cousin, who'd sheltered Yvonne, was in trouble. He was jumped outside Lena's place right after Sarah left. He's in the hospital, critical. Marcus's world spun, his bruised ribs forgotten. Ty, 22, a mechanic with a laugh like summer, was family, his rock. "Who?" Marcus choked. Ortiz paused. "Klein's nephew and 2 others. They knew Ty was with Lena." Marcus's blood iced. Vance had struck again, not at him, but at Ty, a blade to his heart. The attack wasn't random, it was retaliation for Sarah's move. Marcus clutched the cot, rage drowning grief. Ty had warned him to hide, but Marcus had pushed, chasing the ledger, and now Ty paid. Ortiz continued, "Lena's safe, but Sarah's gone dark. The ledger's still out there, but the feds won't move without it." Marcus's hope crumbled. Sarah, spooked by the attack, might run, taking the ledger with her. The hospital news hit the local blogs, twisted, Tate family linked to gang violence. The lie claimed Ty had provoked Klein's nephew, painting Marcus's kin as thugs. Stop Tate family spiked, comments vicious, whole families rotten and jail them all. Marcus's grief hardened into fury. Vance wasn't just framing him, he was slaughtering his family's name. He called Ortiz, voice raw. "Find Sarah. Ty's hurt because of me. Get the ledger or this never ends." Ortiz hesitated. "Marcus, the feds need time. And Ty, he might not—" She trailed off. Marcus hung up, his mind a storm. Ty's laugh, his duffel, his warning, all burned in him. The ledger was his only shot, but Vance's hit on Ty was a checkmate, a blow to his soul. At midnight the guard passed, slipping a pen and paper. "Write it," she whispered. Marcus scrawled the Delta Holdings details for Ortiz, his hand shaking. The guard took it, vanishing. Was she helping, or was this another setup? He couldn't trust, not after Jamal, not after the fire. He lay awake, the cells cold, biting, his bruises. The hearing loomed, his bail appeal dead, and Ty's life hung by a thread. Sarah's ledger was a ghost, and Vance's power was a noose, tightening with every move. Marcus pictured Yvonne at Ty's bedside, her rosary worn from prayers. His fight had cost her a home, now maybe a nephew. Yet his internship, his vow to expose corruption, was a fire in his gut. He'd find Sarah or her safe deposit box or die trying. Vance thought Ty's blood would break him, thought cuffs would silence him. He was wrong. Marcus sat up, jaw tight. The invoice number's a lifeline. Ortiz would hunt, Lena would push, and he'd face Vance no matter the cost. A siren wailed outside, closer now, and Marcus braced. Was Vance's next trap closing in? Marcus Tate's cell was a cage of despair, the Fairmont jail's damp walls mocking his fight. At 17, he was a black teenager whose Supreme Court internship had become a death sentence in Alabama's corrupt heart. Judge Harold Vance's planted knife, the toughened fake intern smear, and the fire that destroyed his mother Yvonne's home were blows that bled him dry. Bradley Klein's lies, Ed Grayson's coerced testimony, and the attack on his cousin Ty, now critical. In the hospital were Vance's wrath, each strike sharper. The USB footage proving Marcus didn't steal Klein's car was dismissed. Justice Elena Harper's verification stalled, and Sarah Wells, the clerk with Vance's bribe ledger, had vanished after Ty's beating. Marcus's ribs ached from the courthouse assault, but his mind was a furnace, fueled by Ty's blood and Yvonne's tears. The ledger, hidden in Sarah's safe deposit box, was his last weapon to expose Vance's Delta Holdings bribes. Carla, Ortiz, his lawyer, was chasing immunity for Sarah, and Lena Brooks was hunting her trail. Marcus sat on the cot, whispering the invoice numbers, 10,000 monthly Carl Vance's signature, a lifeline against the dark. A guard's boots echoed, and Marcus braced, expecting another note, or worse. Instead, the young black guard, his silent ally, opened the cell at dawn. "You're out," she said, eyes darting. "Bail's reinstated." Ortiz pulled strings. Marcus's heart leapt, but suspicion gnawed. Was this Fairmont truth, or Vance's trap? He followed, cuffs off, ribs screaming, and stepped into the jail's harsh light. Ortiz waited outside, her face grim. "Lena found Sarah," she said. "She's at a motel, 20 miles out. Wants immunity, but she'll hand over the ledger. Tonight. We need you there." Marcus nodded, his mission roaring back. Ty's pain, Yvonne's loss, fueled him. He believed the ledger would end Vance. He was wrong. Ortiz drove, the Alabama highway blurring under a cloudy 60-degree noon. Marcus, in a borrowed jacket, clutched his cracked phone, texting Lena. "Motel. Be ready." Lena replied, "Sarah's scared, but she's got it. Keys with her." Marcus's hope surged. If they secured the ledger, Ortiz could file for a federal probe, maybe save Ty's life with a win. The motel, a run-down strip off the interstate, smelled of diesel and desperation. Lena met them in the lot, her braids loose, eyes sharp. "Room 12, she said. "Sarah's jumpy, let's move." Marcus followed, heart pounding, the weight of Ty's hospital bed crushing him. Room 12's door was ajar, Sarah inside, a thin white woman in her 40s, clutching a duffel. Her eyes flicked to Marcus, fear raw. "You the kid?" she asked. He nodded. "Immunity's coming," Ortiz said, handing her a drafted deal. Sarah exhaled, pulling a leather-bound ledger from the duffel. Marcus's breath caught. Pages listed. Delta Holdings payments, dates, Carl Vance's initials, tied to prison contracts. It was dynamite, enough to bury Vance. Sarah handed it over, trembling. "They'll kill me," she whispered. Marcus believed they'd won, that the ledger would free him. He was wrong. As Ortiz tucked the ledger in her briefcase, tires screeched. Outside, Marcus peered through the blinds, his stomach dropping. 2 pickups, Klein's nephew in one, the scarred deputy Roy Haskins in the other, blocked the lot. "It's a trap," Lena hissed, grabbing a tire iron from her bag. Sarah screamed, bolting for the bathroom, but Haskins kicked the door in, his baton gleaming. "Nice try, intern," he snarled. Klein's nephew, flanked by 2 thugs, stormed in, one wielding a crowbar. Marcus dove behind the bed, ribs flaring as Ortiz swung her briefcase, clipping Haskins. Lena cracked the tire iron on a thug's arm, but the nephew tackled her, pinning her down. Marcus lunged, grabbing the crowbar, but Haskins's baton smashed. His shoulder, pain blinding. The ledger fell, pages scattering. Sarah cowered, useless, as Haskins laughed. "Vance owns this town, boy." Marcus scrambled, snatching a page, but the nephew's boot cracked his wrist, the crowbar grazing his skull. Blood streamed, his vision swimming, but he shoved the page in his sock, a final defiance. Ortiz shouted, "Federal evidence," but Haskins pistol whipped her, her body slumping. Lena fought, biting the nephew's hand, but a thug knocked her out. Marcus crawled, the ledger's pages trampled, his mission crumbling. Haskins grabbed him, slamming him against the wall, the baton poised to crush his throat. "You're done," he spat. Headlights flashed, sirens wailed, and Haskins froze. A state trooper's SUV screeched into the lot, lights blazing. Marcus gasped, blood choking him, as Haskins cursed, shoving him down. The troopers, outsiders, not Vance's, stormed in, guns drawn. "Hands up!" one yelled. Haskins and the A. Thugs bolted, Klein's nephew tripping over Lena's body. Marcus collapsed, the page in his sock a burning coal, Ortiz groaning, Lena stirring. Sarah was gone, vanished in the chaos, her duffel empty. The troopers cuffed the nephew, the only one caught, and called medics. Marcus, bloodied, whispered to Ortiz, "The page. I saved one." She nodded, barely conscious, as medics lifted her. The ledger was scattered, most of it lost, but Marcus's page held a single payment, 10,000 dated last month. It wasn't enough, but it was something. The troopers questioned him, their faces neutral, not Fairmont's hate. "Oh, you're lucky we got a tip," one said. Marcus's mind flashed to the guard, Fairmont truth maybe. He didn't know. At the hospital, Marcus's wrist was splintered, his skull scanned, pain a constant hum. Ortiz, concussed, was stable. Lena, bruised but awake. Ty was still critical. Yvonne at his side, her eyes hollow. The ambush wasn't just a loss. It was Vance's vow to kill. The page, slipped to Ortiz, was a flicker, but Sarah's flight and the ledger's ruin. Marcus Tate sat in a Fairmont hospital room, his splintered wrist throbbing under the fluorescent glare. At 17, he was a black teenager whose Supreme Court internship had become a battle against Alabama's corrupt core. Judge Harold Vance's planted knife, the fake intern smear, the fire that razed his mother Yvonne's home, and the attack on his cousin Ty, still critical, were blows that carved him raw. Bradley Klein's lies, Ed Grayson's coerced testimony, and the motel ambush that scattered Sarah Wells's ledger had nearly broken him. The single ledger page Marcus saved, detailing a $10,000 Delta Holdings bribe to Vance, was his final weapon, slipped to Carla Ortiz before medics hauled him away. Lena Brooks, battered but fierce, was rallying support, and Justice Elena Harper's verification of his internship had finally hit the court. Marcus's ribs ached from the courthouse beating, his skull tender from the motel crowbar, but his mission burned. Expose Vance's prison firm ties. Ortiz, concussed but back, met him at dawn, her eyes fierce. "The page is enough for a federal probe," she said, clutching a manila folder. "The feds are sniffing, thanks to Harper's pull. We file today, force a hearing." Marcus nodded, hope flickering despite the pain. Ty's hospital bed, Yvonne's hollow gaze fueled him. He believed the probe would nail Vance, free him, save his family. He was wrong. Ortiz drove him to the courthouse, Fairmont Street simmering under a 70-degree haze. The crowd outside was split. Lena's protesters with "Justice for Marcus" signs, and Klein's mob, their "No Thugs" banners sharp with hate. Marcus's cheek still bore the rock's graze, his suit torn but defiant. The hearing, a last shot before trial, was his stage. Ortiz had the USB footage, Grayson's shaky confession, and the ledger page, a trifecta to demand federal oversight. Marcus whispered the Delta Holdings numbers. 10,000. Carl Vance's signature, a mantra against fear. The courtroom buzzed. Vance on the bench, his jowls quivering with a predator's calm. Klein sat front row, smirking, the scarred deputy Roy Haskins looming nearby. Marcus stood, Ortiz at his side, heart pounding. She opened, voice clear. "Your Honor, we have evidence of judicial corruption. This ledger page from Delta Holdings shows bribes to Judge Vance tied to prison contracts." The room gasped, jurors shifting. Marcus's hope surged as Ortiz presented the page, its ink stark. 10,000, dated last month, Carl's initials. She followed with Harper's letter, verifying Marcus's internship, and the USB footage, proving his innocence. Vance's eyes narrowed, but Marcus believed the truth would win. He was wrong. Vance leaned forward, voice oily. "This page lacks context, counsel, and the internship, while noted, doesn't negate theft or intimidation." Ortiz pressed, "We request a federal probe into these bribes, Your Honor. The evidence warrants it." Vance's gavel hovered, his face a mask. Then a new voice cut through. "I object," said a man in a crisp suit, stepping forward. Marcus's stomach dropped. It was Paul Dennison, a federal prosecutor, supposedly neutral. "This ledger is unverified," Dennison said, "and Mr. Tate's actions breaking into the courthouse suggest fabrication." Marcus's blood iced. Dennison wasn't neutral, he was Vance's. Ortiz gasped, "This is outrageous." But Vance smirked. "Mr. Dennison's point stands. No probe until authenticity is confirmed." Marcus's mind spun. The ledger, his lifeline, was being buried. Dennison wasn't done. Furthermore, he said, producing a document, we have testimony from Sarah Wells, recanting her claims. She says Mr. Tate coerced her into planting the ledger. Marcus's world tilted. Sarah, who'd fled the motel, had turned, her fear bought or broken. The courtroom erupted, Klein's mob cheering, Lena's protesters shouting. Ortiz slammed her fist. Sarah's coerced, Your Honor. This is a setup. Vance banged his gavel. Enough, the ledger's dismissed, and Mr. Tate's bail remains revoked. Marcus's knees buckled, Haskins's grin burning into him. The betrayal wasn't just Sarah's, it was Dennison's, a federal pawn in Vance's game. Marcus whispered to Ortiz, How? She shook her head, pale. Vance's reach is deeper than we thought. We're outmaneuvered. The hearing spiraled, Vance calling Klein to testify again. Marcus is a danger, Klein lied, voice steady. He burned his own house, attacked my nephew. The jury, mostly white, nodded, eating the lies. Marcus's footage, Grayson's tape, Harper's letter, all drowned in Vance's flood. At 3, Dennison dropped the final bomb. We're charging Mr. Tate with evidence tampering, he said, holding Marcus's lost knife, now found, in Sarah's motel room. Marcus shouted, That's a lie. But deputies grabbed him, cuffs snapping tight. Ortiz yelled, This is perjury. But Vance's gavel silenced her. Mr. Tate will remain in custody, pending trial, Vance declared. Marcus's mission, his internship, was ash. Sarah's betrayal, Dennison's stab, were Vance's checkmate, a blow to his core. As deputies dragged him out, he saw Yvonne in the back, sobbing, Lena beside her, face grim. The crowd outside roared, Klein's signs waving, Lena's dwindling. In the holding cell, Marcus slumped, the cell's mildew choking him. The ledger page, his gambit, had sparked a probe, but Vance's federal ally had crushed it. Ty's pain, Yvonne's loss, his own blood, all for nothing. Yet his training kicked in, a flicker in the dark. Ortiz could appeal, Lena could dig, and the guard, maybe Fairmont Truth, was still out there. Marcus sat up, jaw tight. Vance thought betrayal would end him, thought cuffs would silence him. He was wrong. Marcus memorized Dennison's name, Sarah's lie, the ledger's numbers. He'd fight, expose Vance's federal ties, or die trying. A guard's boots echoed, and Marcus braced. Was Vance's next hit coming? Marcus Tate's cell was a tomb, the Fairmont jail's mildew stench a constant choke. At 17, he was a black teenager whose Supreme Court internship had become a war against Alabama's corrupt soul. Judge Harold Vance's planted knife, the fake intern smear, the fire that obliterated his mother Yvonne's home, and the attack on his cousin Ty, still clinging to life, were wounds that bled him dry. Bradley Klein's lies, Ed Grayson's coerced testimony, Sarah Wells's betrayal, and federal prosecutor Paul Dennison's stab had crushed his fight. The USB footage proving Marcus didn't steal Klein's car was dismissed, Justice Eleanor Harper's verification buried, and the single ledger page of Vance's Delta Holdings bribes was discredited. Marcus's ribs ached from beatings, his wrist splintered, his skull tender, but his mission to expose Vance's prison firm ties burned like a dying star. Carla Ortiz, his lawyer, was filing appeals, Lena Brooks was rallying a fading crowd, and the mysterious guard, possibly Fairmont Truth, was his last flicker of hope. Marcus sat on the cot, whispering the ledger's numbers. 10,000 monthly, Carl Vance's signature, a vow against despair. The final hearing loomed, a trial to seal his fate, and Vance's federal ally, Dennison, had charged him with evidence tampering. Marcus's fight felt futile, Ty's pain and Yvonne's loss a weight he couldn't bear, yet his internship, his training to spot corruption's cracks, was a spark. A guard's boots echoed, and the young black woman, his silent ally, opened the cell at dawn. Ortiz needs you, she said, eyes urgent. Move. Marcus followed, heart pounding, ribs screaming, into a transport van. The courthouse, Fairmont's brick fortress, buzzed with chaos. Lena's protesters, now 100 strong, clashed with Klein's mob, their no thugs signs splattered with paint. Marcus, in a torn suit, stepped out, the 75-degree air heavy with sweat and fury. Ortiz met him, her face fierce. "The guard got us a break," she whispered. "She's Fairmont Truth, leaked Vance's emails to the feds. They're here." Marcus's breath caught. Federal agents, not Denison's, were in the crowd, watching. The ledger page, though dismissed, had sparked enough noise to draw real scrutiny. Ortiz clutched a new folder. "The guard hacked Vance's server. Emails tie him to Delta, Denison too. We're forcing a public hearing now." Marcus's hopes surged. A fragile thing. He believed the emails would end Vance, free. Him save Ty. He was wrong. The courtroom was a powder keg, Vance on the bench, his jowls quivering with rage. Klein sat smirking, Haskins looming, Denison in a corner, eyes cold. The jury, mostly white, stared at Marcus, their faces hard. Ortiz stood, voice thunder. "Your Honor, new evidence demands federal oversight. Emails from Judge Vance's server show bribes from Delta Holdings, coordinated with Prosecutor Denison." The room erupted, gasps and shouts colliding. Marcus's heart raced as Ortiz displayed the emails, stark on a screen. Vance to Carl, 10,000 clears the docket, and Denison to Vance. Tate's case stays buried. Lena's protesters cheered outside, audible through windows. Marcus locked eyes with the guard, now in plainclothes, nodding from the back. Fairmont Truth had delivered. Vance's face purpled, his gavel slamming. "This is a stunt," he roared, "unverified, inadmissible." But a federal agent, a black woman in a sharp blazer, stood. "Not quite, Your Honor. We're seizing. Your record's effective now." The room froze, Klein's smirk gone, Haskins shifting. Marcus believed it was over, that Vance's empire would fall. He was wrong. Denison rose, voice smooth. "If I may, this court's compromised. I move to transfer Mr. Tate's case to Montgomery, under my supervision." Marcus's stomach dropped. Denison wasn't folding. He was stealing the board. Ortiz shouted, "He's implicated." But Vance, cornered, seized the lifeline. "Granted," he said, gavel crashing. "Case transferred. Mr. Tate remains in custody." Marcus's world spun, deputies grabbing him, cuffs biting. The emails, the feds, were a win, but Denison's move was a blade, yanking him from Fairmont's spotlight to a new battlefield, under his enemy's thumb. Ortiz fought, "This is obstruction," but the agent intervened. "We'll oversee the transfer. Vance, you're suspended pending investigation." The crowd roared, Lena's voice piercing, "Justice for Marcus!" Yet Marcus's victory was ash. Denison's smile, as deputies dragged him out, was a promise of worse. In the van, Marcus slumped, Yvonne's sobs from the courtroom echoing. Ty's life, her home, his freedom hung by a thread. The guard, Fairmont Truth, had exposed Vance, but Denison's power was deeper, a federal noose tightening. Ortiz caught his eye through the van's window, mouthing, "We'll appeal." Marcus nodded, but despair clawed him. The hearing's twist wasn't justice. It was a trap moving him to Montgomery, where Denison could bury him quietly. Yet his training kicked in, a final spark. The emails were public, Vance's suspension real. Lena's crowd was growing, as free Marcus trending again. Marcus sat straighter, pain a dull hum. He'd memorized Denison's email, its phrasing, a clue to his next move. Ortiz could trace it, Lena could rally, and the guard might still help. Vance was down, but Denison was the new king, and Marcus would fight him. In Montgomery, he'd testify, expose the federal rot, or die trying. The van hit a bump, Fairmont fading, and Marcus braced. Denison thought he'd won. Thought distance would silence him. He was wrong. Marcus's mission, his internship, was a fire that wouldn't die. As sirens wailed, a new cell loomed, but so did a new fight. The story of Marcus Tate, a black teenager battling systemic racism in Fairmont, Alabama, reveals profound truths about resilience, injustice, and the cost of truth. First, it underscores the unrelenting grip of systemic racism, as Marcus faces false charges, a rigged courtroom, and violent retaliation from Judge Harold Vance and Bradley Klein. His fight shows that racist systems thrive on power, not truth, manipulating evidence and public perception to silence dissent. Yet Marcus's courage, honed by his Supreme Court internship, teaches that individual defiance can spark change, even against overwhelming odds. His refusal to break, despite losing his home, his cousin Ty's health and his freedom, proves that hope is a weapon, sharpened by purpose. Second, the story exposes the fragility of justice in racist environments. Vance's bribes, Denison's betrayal, and Sarah's coerced silence reveal how corruption festers when unchecked. Marcus's partial victory exposing Vance's emails shows that truth can wound, but systemic racism often adapts, as Denison's transfer to Montgomery proves. Finally, it highlights the personal toll of fighting racism. Yvonne's loss, Ty's pain, and Marcus's scars are a stark reminder that justice demands sacrifice. This tale urges us to confront racist systems head-on, support those who fight, and amplify their voices. Marcus's story isn't just his, it's a call to dismantle injustice, one truth at a time. What racist barriers have you seen, and how can we break them? Comment one below, like, subscribe, and share to keep this fight alive. Thank you for standing with Marcus's courage. Here's to building a world where truth triumphs over hate.